every business in the world always starts off with marketing. Like if you don't have marketing blood, you're going to have to keep that wheel in momentum going from day one all the way till day, 1,000, 10,000. But it's when you have more consistency in marketing, if you want to be able to market even heavier or more aggressively, you're going to have like the actual operations sustain that even stronger. And the way that I like to think about it is your operations in the formulaic way is your product is like the numerator in the formula, because you can only sell one at a time or two. But then your marketing is the multiplier. How many channels can you multiply that one single product? And how often can you pound on that and get that momentum moving faster?
On this episode of Business Growth, I'm talking with Raul Hernandez, and he's the author of a new book called Productive Profits. The reason why we're having this conversation is because I read the book, Productive Profits. I thought it was so good that I wanted to have him on the podcast and share some of the frameworks, lessons inside of the book. So we're actually going to get right to the point inside of this interview. We're going to unpack one of the most valuable frameworks called Evergreen Flows. And this is going to work regardless of your business type. And it's not something that's necessarily tactical, but it's very strategic. So if you're running a business that's just starting out and you're only doing, $100,000 a year or less, it's going to be profitable for you to listen and apply these. Or if you happen to have a business that's scaling and you're maybe crossing from 7 to 8 figures or 8 to 9, definitely applicable here. So let's jump straight into the interview with Raul. Raul, welcome to the Business Growth Podcast.
Hey, Spencer. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. You and I, we've been talking back and forth about your book, Productive Profits. It's been in the hands of a lot of people now. And today we're going to kind of pull open the book. We're going to talk about different frameworks, methodologies, and thinking that goes behind this. Can you quickly give our audience, bring us up to speed in 30 seconds, who you are, why you wrote the book, and then we're going to start to jam on content.
Absolutely. So Raul Hernandez, based out of San Diego, pretty much business coaching consultant. But the reason why I wrote the book was because with successful businesses who have momentum, either month-over-month growth or reach a certain level of revenue, there is an inflection point of a new baseline before you can actually expand into another level of growth or to a new frontier, really. But in that inflection point, I've seen businesses either crumble, either chaos ensues, or having stagnating growth, or some businesses actually have fluid growth and rapid growth over a short period of time. So the difference between that I've seen isn't in your marketing, because you can sell a really good product any day. It's actually how you package and deliver your services or product, and how you work with the team to be able to scale not only the infrastructure, but have a solid infrastructure that can support a multi-plane, either product service delivery, and reach a new level of expansion. Because what I care about with my clients, most business owners that I work with care that they're in the front lines of their mission. They're mission-driven entrepreneurs. That doesn't mean that they're delivering, charity water or free shoes like Tom's and stuff like that. That can be the case. But in regards to the mission that I'm discussing here, it's their business impacts people in a certain way, and they want to help as many people as possible through doing that. So not only does expansion mean new levels of success for you in the business and the profitability, but it also means other avenues in which you can, expand your impact. Either that's investing in a new company, hiring or developing a new team, a sub-team within your company to develop new services, or if that's spending time where you care most, if with family, with a new kid, or any other frontiers that you wouldn't otherwise have access to or the bandwidth for if you were in your initial levels of growth.
Okay. Hey, that's a great explanation. I think why this resonates so well with me, and I think why it will resonate with the audience, is I've been through those different levels. And, currently in the primary company I'm running, what took us from, 0 to 5 isn't going to take us from 5 to 10. And so there is that process where many of the models, frameworks, things, you just have to crumble and throw back down to the foundation, and you take the things that were best. So as I went and did my homework, I read your book. I noticed that, one, you're looking at processes, systems from a different way than most people. So first, maybe you can categorize certain stages, where and when is it that a business is going to hit a threshold that they can't surpass? And then what are some of those processes and frameworks they should be focusing on?
I think I'll give you real examples based on some of the conversations I've had in the last couple of weeks. So we had a gentleman who has like a done for you service, and his initial goal is to get to 1,000 accounts, right? It's a lower ticket done for you service, but he's able to scale that almost like a SaaS, but it's still done by individuals, right? The biggest thing that I've seen in some cases is just putting things together, almost duct tape, to get to a certain level of growth, like to get a certain level of market exposure, first to market, and then be able to from there look at the back end and say, how can I streamline the product or service delivery? Every business in the world always starts off with marketing. Like if you don't have marketing blood, you're going to have to keep that wheel in momentum going from day one all the way till day, 1,000. 10,000. But it's when you have more consistency in marketing, if you want to be able to market even heavier or more aggressively, you're going to have like the actual operations sustain that even stronger. And the way that I like to think about it is your operations in the formulaic way is your product is like the numerator in a formula, because you can only sell one at a time or two. But then your marketing is the multiplier. How many channels can you multiply that one single product? And how often can you pound on that and get that momentum moving faster? But your operations, the back end, how everything works, it's pretty much your exponent, because a really solid operations, the infrastructure can contain a plethora of products who have their own product fulfillment and service delivery, systems and automations going for them.
So that's, I think, probably one of the hard pieces, because most entrepreneurs actually don't want to be in the operations side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of entrepreneurs, and I'm speaking for myself, it doesn't come natural in many ways. We may be really good at developing the product, or we may be good at sales, marketing, whatever that may be, but the actual operations is the duct tape world.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it that you're able to look at a business, find out where you can optimize and where you can implement processes? And how are you taking that approach? Like, is this something natural, something you developed over time? Help us explain that, and then help understand the implementation piece.
That's a great question, because I was actually discussing that with a mentor recently. When you take a look at any business, the thing that I've noticed between either other people who do the same thing that I do, or look at how I approach my work, is instead of applying customers or my clients into a box, like this is the way I do things, you should do it this way, and it's more tactical thinking, I focus more on the principles of reviewing. Well, let's look at every aspect of your company. Let's look at your team. Let's look at your numbers. And it's very basic, but we actually go very deep. Like, how do you develop your brand and your culture, and how does that seamlessly work together to achieve the mission you're working towards, right? And we dive into the team in a very strategic way, from communications to facilitating process and project management, to all the way of, are your employees actually happy? Because happier employees are actually more productive, right? And then when it comes from that to the number side, is, do you have your pulse on the accurate metrics in your company at all times? So once you have that baseline, then I don't put anyone in a box. I actually have, I work with clients to develop like a design of what their ideal outcome for the company is, not only today, but 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And then from there, we're able to adapt the current reality to where they want to be, using 80% principle, 20% customized specifically to their needs. Some might be completely on-site clients or on-site companies where people go to work in a building, or it can be completely remote where you have people from 7 different time zones and you're just communicating all mobily.
I think with the current, push for work from home,
Mm-hmm.
all of us worldwide are actually experiencing right now. We're seeing that. So one of the things in your book, you have a framework called Evergreen Flows.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Evergreen Flows, Raul is going to explain in just a moment. And it's something that I implemented with my ops manager. And we actually went through on a whiteboard and went through this. So explain that framework of Evergreen Flows. And I think it kind of dovetails into what you were just talking about, of creating those processes, not from a tactical, but like actual specific to that business.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things as well with mobile teams or remote teams is that lack of communication or miscommunications will happen 100% guaranteed. But it's how you, one, recoup from those miscommunications, and two, how you can clear up communications so that you don't have redundancies is a different approach. So what I did with Evergreen Flows is essentially look at your key company habits. So every company has a series of actions that perform their habits. If it's going to be like this podcast, like you have a habit of recording, and then your editor and producer or the publisher has their habits of how they're going to do it, how they're going to push it to the market. And that's always continual. So it's taking key habits like those in every aspect of your company and creating a visual, not only just a visual for the person doing it to see, but the visual for everyone involved with that specific process. Because I found that that visual helps clear up a lot of questions, multidisciplinary teams across different time zones, and you're able to really document and package everything together into what I call a one-page SOP using that one Evergreen Flow.
So the one-page SOP, that's, and just listeners so you know, it's actually included in the book. So I'm going to kind of pause for a second and give my honest opinion. When I read Raul's book, and I got a pre-released copy of it, I went through the first chapter and I was like, it's kind of typical business stuff. Sorry. And then like second chapter, I was like, huh. And then I started diving. I was like, holy crap, this is really good. And then every single chapter started to build up and was better and better, to the point where I've paid consultants big dollars, and I got a lot more value out of that book than I did from consultants that I've paid, $500+ an hour. And so I was really impressed. The one-page SOP is something that all of you listeners definitely want to apply in your business. That's just like, I'm not compensated for this. Like, I really firmly believe it that much. How did you come up with the framework of the one-page SOP and just like the simple process of creating this?
One, I like simplicity and centralized information. And two, after scrolling of endless SOPs in the past and seeing other people's 80-page documents, I'm like, this is way too redundant and it takes too much time for it to even load on my computer. But I think I care about keeping things simple for the user. Like if I'm actually going out, even thinking tactically, if I'm going out to do something and need all the resources in one place, I don't want to be questioning myself as I'm doing the work. Oh yeah, where was that one piece, or where is this other piece, or did I forget to bring everything with me? Same thing applies for your online work and the work that we do every day. You want to give your team the resources and the access so that they can act autonomously. And you also want to kind of impart your brain to them. And part of the one-page SOP, there's decision delegation, where you create not only if-then scenarios, but you also apply your way of thinking without restricting the team to only think in that way, by allowing them to think on their feet and be autonomous. But with some processes where there really isn't much thinking to do, it's either this one way that we do things correctly or it's no other way. And it's clearing up so that the business owner knows that one area of their business is being taken care of. So they don't really have to have a mental bandwidth on worrying and can focus on other aspects of the business that require their level of thinking.
You mentioned the word autonomy, and I think a lot of business owners feel like they have employees that have to do it exactly their way.
Mm-hmm.
And by giving that autonomy back to the team members, I've seen like the accidental growth or happy growth where, they do something that you wouldn't even expect, and it actually causes more revenue to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And what worked in the past doesn't work in the future. So I applaud you for that.
I appreciate that. One of the key things, we have a leadership chapter at the end. And the reason why I left it at the end is because when you build these flows, these one-page SOPs, the flows, I want it to be built, but it be a living, breathing document. Like this isn't one thing and it's set in stone. And then when life punches you in the face 3 months from now, when that thing doesn't work anymore, you have to go back and fix it. I don't want that. I want this to always be adapted and evolved to the current situation and the current pulse of the market. So that's why the leadership piece is also, if it's not the most critical part, it's one of the most important parts of the book, because it's how you apply that as a leader to not actually just lead your team to the mission and success, but also to give them kind of like empowering them for them to have ownership and stake in the results.
Interesting. I think now more than ever, I'm going to beat that drum again in our asynchronous communication and working from home. This is more important. I want to keep this interview really tight and brief, helpful for our listeners. I want to shift gears for a second, maybe kind of go a little bit tactical. What are some of the communication tools and things that you use? Or we can even just go framework if you don't want to use tool, if you want to be tool agnostic, that you can share with our listeners. As maybe some are transitioning to work from home, or maybe it's team members that are listening to this episode.
I think, we can dive into the tools I use. I think I get that question a lot, like what tools do I use? And I kind of always answer saying that it doesn't matter what tools you use, it's how you use them. When it comes to communication, especially for leaders and even for team members, as leaders, this is to the leaders, you want to have one main channel of communication, two maximum, for people to reach you, for you to communicate clearly and see how all the communication's happening on your team. One main, because that's less bandwidth for you, but also it's less stress on the team. On the team as well, it's key to have clear channels of communication. If it's going to be email or, I'm not going to say, I don't want to say the word, but Slack, right?
You can say Slack, and that's what we use.
But just having, I know,
but there are some people that don't, so that's totally fine.
So personally, I use Basecamp for all team communications, documentation, and then we use Slack in addition to that, right? With outside vendors, prospective clients, anything else, email. Obviously, you can't really get rid of email, but Basecamp really helps me hone in all the communications in one centralized spot, and I know exactly what to check into the pulse of any given initiative in less than 2 minutes.
Awesome. Okay. We're not going to dive into the specific tools. Yes, I am a Slack fanboy. So there we go. And I totally agree. You have to keep it in one channel. What other types of communication? Because when you're trying to create SOPs, it's quite difficult at times just having the written text. So are you doing a lot of screen capture and screen recording as you are explaining processes and frameworks, or how you actually getting the information from your head actually into someone's hands?
Well, typically it's always going to start in the Evergreen Flow, because there you can see, is the current process even optimized to fulfill the needs? Are there redundancies or bottlenecks in every area that I'm not seeing? Because once you create the flow, and you'll see it in the book, with that flow, you have to reach out to other team members and get feedback to make sure that it makes sense to them. And with that, within the OnePage SOP framework, there is either a checklist or resources to detail the action items, but I also include a video portion where someone talks over and discusses what needs to happen, what the expectations are. The reason is we hit all three, modalities of learning: visual, auditory, as well as, tactical, of applied learning by seeing someone else do it.
And in the book, one of the things that you include are processes. So for example, one of my favorite was the hiring and firing processes. They were amazing. One, I think when I had a big aha reading the book, was the 4 telltale signs, am I saying that correct, of when you may need to fire someone.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I thought, okay, this dude really knows his stuff. And then went through setting up the frameworks of how to approach someone that's maybe not performing at the level that you want, and what type of conditions to put in place. Again, did that come from like the School of Hard Knocks, or how did you come about and create that framework?
That's pure experience. So everything,
you're like, don't make me cry on the podcast, please.
Everything in the book is either my own experience or experiences with other businesses. There's no, I try to take away as much opinion and theory. This is what works. This is what's applied. And this is what's going to save you time. Because I've had issues where I didn't fire quickly.
I think we all have. Yeah. And it's like, when we do it, we're like, why didn't I do? The only question you really ask is like, why didn't I do that sooner? And it's just fear. That's the only reason why we don't.
Yeah.
And the fears are typically really irrational fears as well.
But they exist nonetheless.
They do. But, the shorter gap that we can get to feedback and then just executing on that is so much better.
Exactly.
It's, you and I could have this conversation for hours and hours. I would love to. But what I want to do is be the most effective with our time and our listeners' time. So one thing that I would love for you guys to do as listeners is grab a copy of this book. It really is something incredibly valuable for you. I will say this, if you are a brand new opportunity seeker and you don't know what business you want to do, this probably isn't the book for you right now. It may be the book for you in a few months. If you have a business, you have traction, this is something for you to implement right now. And if you happen to already have outside consultants you're working with or others, monthly I pay outside consultants, several, that are helping with our operations. And like for me, I can build systems, but they're not going to be the best. And so I have consultants that I'm paying to create our SOPs and do other things. And I, had them grab a copy of this book and say, hey, like this will help. And they've come back and they don't feel threatened. And they say, absolutely, like this is making it so that we can build our OnePage SOPs and other things. So can't really speak highly enough of it. I really enjoyed it every bit.
No, I appreciate that, man. And I'll send over the resources as well.
Perfect. And for you listeners, what you can do is, if I remember correctly, dogoodwork.io.
.io.
Oh gosh,
Correct.
I got it right. Okay. So go to dogoodwork.io/book. We'll put that in the show notes as well. We'll put Raul's contact info, like to his LinkedIn, into his Venmo account, so you can send him lots of money and say thank you. And he rolled his eyes if you're listening to the audio. Really just want everyone on this podcast to realize like how impactful it was for me. So once I read it, I realized that this was an episode that would be helpful for all of you. I'm not getting compensated. You guys know that. I don't do consulting with anyone in this audience. It's just for me to share. This is my little mastermind for helping you guys. And I hope it's helpful. We'll make sure to put all of your information in the podcast. And I seriously appreciate you spending time with us today.
Humbled, man. I appreciate you. Thank you.